Welcome to another episode of Let's Be Frank. It's not just any episode, however, it's a special bonus bite-sized special. There you go. Those of our regular listeners will know that we recently had on Catherine from Tai Chi in the Chilterns, and during the show, due to time constraints, we didn't get around to doing her 3 for Freedom section, which we always like to do at the end of the show. Well, I know Catherine had given some deep consideration to her answers, so we said we'd get her back on when she was next around to finish off. So here she is. She's here with me today. Hello, Catherine. Are you ready to reveal your 3 for Freedom?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Ready, willing and able. So we like to start by going back to the earliest period of your life. So I'm thinking sort of 6 or 7 years old when I say childhood. So for those of our regular listeners who may have forgotten how the concept works, or any new listeners, welcome on board. So this section is called 3 for Freedom, where we get our guests to pick a book, a movie and an album, a song or an artist that has inspired you during the following periods of your life. So the first period is childhood, the second period is as a moody yet impeccably cool teenager, and the third period is as a moody yet impeccably cooler adult. So, as I say, we're going to go straight back to childhood first of all. So I'm thinking 6 or 7 years old, Catherine. So a book, a movie and an album or a song or an artist that inspired you during your childhood. What have we got?
Yeah, it's quite difficult just choosing one, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So there is a thought process that I've sort of gone through. And with childhood, like with the reading, there's a few things that sort of came to my mind, one of which was like Enid Blyton stories. I really wanted to be Anne in The Famous Five. And yeah, sort of all her different sort of series that she did, like I think there was Secret Seven.
That's right.
I think there was some like ones she did on, was it Mallory Towers? It was like sort of somewhere in Devon, like boarding school type sort of girls at boarding school, which I never went to boarding school, but I found that all quite fascinating.
I always remember the dog. There was the Secret Seven or the Famous Five. There was a dog involved, and the dog was always getting him into trouble. I remember thinking to myself, that dog is always going off and getting into trouble, and the rest of them are getting dragged along into trying to rescue him or find him or do something or other. I can't remember what the dog was called.
No, was it Timothy the dog?
Could have been.
Timothy the dog,
yeah.
I think, yeah. And I think there was a TV series for a while as well when I was
Didn't she
a kid.
write 3 children in it or 5 children in it? There's the little Sammy ad thing in the sand. I'm sure that was an Enid Blyton
I don't know
book
that.
as well.
I just remember, sort of wanting to be Anne. So in my make-believe world.
Yeah.
And I did go on to sort of write my own little stories, and I think I made one up which was the Thrilling 3, not the Secret 7 or the Famous 5, it was the Thrilling 3. I don't remember it much, but I did like a whole sort of like proper book type thing, did my own pictures with the cover and everything, and so
it would be interesting.
So I guess that inspired a bit of my writing, maybe.
It would be interesting to go back and look at Anne as a character in the books and see what it was that drew you and kind of.
Well, I think she was the opposite of George. Yeah. George was the tomboy.
Okay.
And she was the girl, you know, the girly girl. Yeah. So that would have been me, you know. You
don't need to go back and analyse it. You've done it already. over time.
I know, eh?
So you used to love the old Enid Blyton books.
Yeah, and I think I had one book that was I had a few Ladybird books. I think most sort of people my sort of age group would probably have had a Ladybird book in their collection as a kid. And I had a few, but the one that I remember was the one on ballet. So it was all about ballet. And I always remember taking it to primary school, to our class. I think we used to do some sort of show and tell type thing. And so I took that book, and I never forget my teacher sort of asking me to do some of the postures that were in the book.
And you blagged it?
I blagged it.
Oh, awesome.
Because I think in the book they had pictures of a lady in ballet attire, but she was showing all the different mime postures they do. Yeah. Because there's no talking in a ballet, but it's a story usually. And so there will be certain movements they do with their hands around their face to mean certain things in a story. So it was that bit that she
born
was
to do it with the Tai Chi, wasn't it? Like that might have been what initially inspired you to get to obviously the dancing and the movement and everything. It's all, you quite often hear those sliding doors moments, don't you? That where a child says, "I took in a book for show and tell on ballet," and a teacher, one of the other teachers, noticed that I had the ballet book, and then she was a ballet teacher, and then their whole life changes over little moments like that, doesn't it? You often hear that. So I thought you were going to say there that your teacher was a ballet teacher, and then she kind of signed you up, and that's where you're dancing.
I was already going to ballet at that point.
Yeah.
I was already.
So you were trying to recruit other people. You're like ballet.
I was just trying to show off. Yeah, that would be me.
I'm really good at this ballet. Show and tell. The book gave you an opportunity to dance and show off what you could do. I could see what you've done there.
That would be me. Yeah, so I think, those kind of books that stick out for me, and I think one other one was one that an old lady who used to babysit for me. It was one of her books.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it would have been for her children or it was her book when she was a child, but it was like from the 1930s.
Yeah.
And it was a famous book. It's The Secret Garden.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Which I think was written around 1910, something like that. And it was quite an old book.
Yeah.
And I just remember loving and being so interested in something that was really another era.
Yeah, there's something awe-inspiring about those old books, isn't there? Like you think there's secrets inside, and you're like, so you don't want to break the book because it's been passed around. It's this secret old book, and like what you find inside
the
is
language, the way things are written, and the illustrations. All quite fascinating.
Lots of words probably that weren't used anymore by that stage, and lots of nice descriptive words. Leads us on to our second section of your childhood. Was there a movie that used to drive everyone mad by watching it over and over and over and over and over and over again?
Well, I mean, obviously sort of having a dance background, I was really interested in sort of musicals.
Yeah.
And so I loved all the black and whites that would be on telly, like Fred Astaire stuff.
Yeah. They were great.
Gene Kelly from the 50s and, Singing in the Rain, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then sort of being around 7 years old, we had the launch of Grease with Olivia Newton-John at the time.
Classic.
And I remember begging my parents to take me. I was like, I want to go. Because I remember it felt like everyone in my class had already been to see it.
Yeah.
Because it was a musical, I was like, I have to go to see this.
Learn all the songs and stuff.
But actually, one that, it was a movie musical that I used to love was The King and I.
Yeah.
And
that's good, yeah.
We ended up in my dance school doing our own sort of version of The King and I. And there's that part in it where the children of the king put on a show for the king.
Yeah.
And so we did this in our dance show, and I had sort of the lead female role in it. And I remember just the absolute fascination in the dress that I had, the headdress, the style we were doing with our dance as well, because it was Siamese, so everything was angular, and with ballet everything was pointed and rounded, and this was the opposite of that, and yet it was still elegant. I loved the dress, which was like a satin gold, and it was like one shoulder, and it had long but splits at the side, and you did it in your bare feet, not in any shoe. It was just, everything about it was just, oh wow, this is so interesting and different, but I like it, but I don't know why. And I remember asking about the Buddha, because the Buddha features in the story, and no one could really tell me much about it.
So that added to the mysticism of it, didn't it? Like this mysterious person called the Buddha, and it probably sparked something in your brain, didn't it? Actually,
for sure,
absolutely,
for sure. And it's only kind of in adult life where I've found my own way into Buddhism. And sort of getting to know the Dharma teachings, that I've looked back at that now and I go, oh, that story was kind of a Dharma teaching. But nobody told me that. I don't think anyone at that time understood that.
Fully realised it,
And so it's like, oh my God, right. So I think there was a fascination that started there.
That was the catalyst, I think, with the mysticism that you said, that what you mentioned in the last podcast, one of the reasons you liked it so much is because of the mystery and it was so far away and Easter and stuff like
as
that.
Well, you got Yul Brynner,
it's a great performance.
I mean, I think they made him look, even more so, sort of Asian than he was, but just that kind of that role of kind of two different cultures, like, and that whole romance thing as well. Which I think even at a young age you could tell that, that's maybe not the norm and not acceptable in society, but
love found a way. One of those. I used to love the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers films. When my nan was in a nursing home towards the end of her days, I used to go and watch films of their older films, and we used to watch the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers films. They were brilliant. I loved them. They were awesome. I was surprised how good they were. I was really
still to this day, like, what a talent.
The dancing and the singing and the story was really good. The acting as well, and what struck me as well, because they were probably, I don't know when they were made, sort of 40s or 50s, maybe even earlier than that.
I think Fred Astaire was sort of 30s. 40s,
how beautiful they were, all the actors in it as well, like, and you're like, wow, this the Hollywood thing, why it went back so far, and they were just really talented, and it struck me how probably 40-50 years before I was even born, how people were still beautiful, basically. And you consider them like it's a modern thing. In the last 10 years people have got beautiful, but going way back when, it might sound a bit weird, but I was just thinking, like, before I was even born, there's all the glamour and Hollywood and all these, the dresses and the hair and the makeup and the guys with their swept back perfect hair and all that kind of stuff. That's one thing that struck me when I was watching the movies, how good they were. I don't know, it might be linked actually. So a band or an artist or a song from your childhood, was there one that you remember first discovering music over? And
well, I know I had a few albums as a kid, and I'm showing my age here. So Bee Gees, Tragedy
I love
album.
the Bee Gees. They're my. I always say to people that they're my guilty secret, but I don't think it's guilty. It's not. No, it's not. I love it. I love the Bee Gees. I don't particularly like the disco stuff, Catherine. I'm more the early stuff when they were more sort of Beatlesy, poppy, kind of the freeway harmonies and the pop songs they wrote, and then some of the later stuff after the disco. The disco stuff was good, but Bee Gees, I think they've had more number ones than the Beatles now with all the songs that Barry Gibb's written for other artists.
Oh right,
he's written loads, hasn't he?
Really talented guys.
Well, he wrote the Grease soundtrack actually that you mentioned a minute ago. That was Barry. So because of the success of Saturday Night Fever, they gave him Grease to write, didn't they? And stuff. So So I love the Bee Gees.
I was a Bee Gees fan, and I had, I think, was it Spirits Having Flown? I think that's an album, or was that the Tragedy album? But there's a song called Spirits Having Flown, and I really like that. And I don't think it was ever a big success.
I have to check that one out.
But it's just one of those like.
They're great. They're great songwriters. It's one of my big regrets that I never got to see them live when all three brothers were alive, to hear those freeway harmonies in person. He did Glastonbury, didn't he, a few years ago before the lockdown, Barry Gibb, and you could see there was that kind of sadness with him that his brothers weren't there to share that moment with him.
Yes.
And it must be difficult as well because he's the oldest brother, isn't he, to lose his two younger brothers. But there was something. It was brilliant at Glastonbury. All my friends and I love the Bee Gees. So
I love a bit of Bee Gees. So Bee Gees as a kid. I think Osmonds. Got a bit of a playing of their albums, and
my mum used to love the Osmonds. Is it?
I mean, now I'm just like, I couldn't even tell you any of the songs really. Was
it Donny Osmond that did that one about the puppy or so? But you love me, Daddy. Was that one of the Osmonds?
Was it?
Oh, he did Puppy Love, did he?
I think. I don't know.
That was Puppy
some of
Love.
The listeners can let us know.
Write in and let me know. But there's this one song called "Don't You Love Me, Daddy." Don't you love me, Daddy? I don't think that was Osmond's.
So twee now, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's brilliant as a kid. You're like. You could feel the emotion of the songs.
I thought Donny was very attractive. So even though I was a little kid, I remember thinking he was an attractive man. And of course there was his sister, wasn't there? what was her name?
Was it Marie?
Marie or Maria, yeah. So, and I think they had a sort of an American TV series and stuff, so they were fairly big out
Well,
there.
funny you say about the catalyst for your inspiration to go and look into Buddhism and all things to do with the Buddha and stuff. It just struck me there that my mum used to put those songs on when she was little, and I can remember her crying. So I probably associate the power of music and emotion from that young age, from those kind of songs. Because my mum used to put those on and have a little cry to herself. They were quite sweet songs, and so obviously subconsciously I've picked up the power and emotion that music can have over people. So that's probably a really big lesson to me at a young age, and why I went on to love music so much, probably, and value it, and I don't like How Now Brown Cow music, as we discussed before we went on air today. Poor lyrics and pop music and stuff, and the power and the emotion that can come from music. Yeah. Interesting.
So I think that's definite 70s vibe, isn't it?
And the dancing again, Catherine. You could boogie away to the Bee Gees songs, couldn't you? So you had the ballet, and then you had your how would you describe it? The more angular music from The King and I, and then you had your disco music as well. So it's just all to do with dancing.
Just to throw into the mix a bit of classical as well. I grew up with the ballet and going to see the ballet. I think the first ballet I went to see, my mum took me to Nottingham Theatre Royal, and it was Giselle. So that was the first full live ballet performance I went to see. So I know that music inside out. We did our own sort of versions, like mini versions at dance school, and Tchaikovsky and Swan Lake, and so I had also all the sort of classical albums as well.
Again, to do with the dancing again, though. So there's the link dancing,
based around that,
Yeah. Okay, so that's the first period of your life put to bed there. Some great answers. So that leads us on to the second phase of your developmental stage of your life, when you were a moody yet impeccably cool teenager. So can you center yourself in those years? You think back to, we're thinking 14, 15, when you first started thinking you were cool, cooler than everyone else. What were you into? What was your?
When
so
you
we'll
weren't
start.
Cool and
well, you thought you
were.
I said you thought you were cool. When you thought you were cooler than everyone else.
I knew I wasn't.
Yeah.
But,
so as a teenager, a book. Is there a book series of books that you liked when you were a teenager?
I think that whole age of kind of coming of age and your hormones, and you first start getting interested in boys, and so I definitely, me and my mates were sort of reading stuff like Daniel Steele and Chili Cooper and all these sort of romance novels that were, I mean, now looking back, I just think, God, what a load of tat to educate yourself on, the world of romance.
A romanticised version of it. In a way, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's the perfect version of how everyone would want it to go, isn't it, really? So there's nothing wrong in that.
The whole, now I think, God, stereotypical sort of at that time, that era, that floated the boat of society. But I mean, I don't think that stuff washes these days, does it? And I think the whole looking back and thinking, well, when you're young and you're just developing into kind of having these emotions and feelings, it's kind of like, if that's your main source of how the perfect is, is supposed to happen, and it's just sort of the roles and that. I just look back and I think
it's an indictment of society a little bit, though, because you had to find inspiration in those books and stuff, because it wasn't as open and talked about as it is now, is it, kind of thing. So you kind of had to be drawn to that kind of thing, and to find out all about love and romance and stuff, because it wasn't really talked about.
With people, just that whole kind of. Just looking back, and I think, what was the source of, because what was moulding us into who we are as adults, and I think, those were not necessarily good role models in those books for me.
No,
I don't think
they're like the damsel in distress, and like the man will come and rescue them and stuff like that. Actually, I don't actually know, because I've never read any of those books, to be honest. So
no, I don't think you're missing much. No, but anyway, anyway, it's part of who I am. So,
do you know, it's been a bit of a running theme when we do 3 for Freedom, that when we get to the teenage years, a lot of people can't remember any books they read. I think they stopped reading books when they got to their teenage years and then kind of came back to them
as
again.
well, there's a sort of choosing not to remember as
yeah.
well. I mean, I
bit of
remember
that.
Adrian Mole books,
the
like
Secret
age
Diary.
13 and a half or something. I mean, that was all about being a spotty teenager and being awkward and being, so...
And there was the TV series, Marmalade. It was kind of, I think her name was Marmalade, wasn't it?
Don't know.
Punky Brewster and stuff like that. It was sold as the female equivalent of Adrian Mole at the time.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it was just a TV kind of series for kids. No,
I don't remember that.
No.
Yeah. I think, one interesting book that I remember that sort of kind of awoke the whole kind of interest in the ancient world and travel around the world was a big volume that my parents had, which was the 7 Wonders of the Ancient World.
Awesome.
And I always remember being fascinated by the pyramids.
Yeah.
And I think the Great Wall of China was in there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like natural wonders.
It
was
gotcha.
like the ancient world. I think there was Hanging Gardens of Babylon was in there.
Yeah.
But that definitely, and I've been to the pyramids and I've been to the Great Wall of China, so it was definitely always something from childhood that I thought that is one of the places I must.
Can you name the 7 wonders? Someone asked me once. I think I got the same 3 or 4 that you just got there. That's about it. I got the Great Wall of China, the pyramids, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I think it's the Machu Picchu. Is it Machu
Picchu?
Machu Picchu. Yeah, that's one of them as well. Easy for me to say.
Is Angkor?
Well, I've got an information device here, so let's have a look.
Cambodia?
Let's have a look. Let's just bring it up on my information device. Here we go. All I have to do is put in the number 7 there and it's come up. Look. So we've either got the 7 Wonders of the World or the 7 Deadly Sins. Right, are you ready for the list? So we've got the Great Wall of China. I don't know. Chichen Itza El Castillo.
Oh.
A Toltec-style pyramid. Chichen Itza in Mexico.
Right.
Petra, the Casma.
Oh, Petra, yes, of course, yeah.
Machu Picchu, as we touched on. Christ the Redeemer in Brazil. The big statue of Christ. The Roman Colosseum, the Taj Mahal. Was that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? So the Hanging Gardens of Babylon's not even on there. I don't know where we've got that from.
Revised,
maybe it is. Yeah.
There.
It's the new 7 Wonders of the World. Let's look at the official.
The ancient.
Let's do the ancient one there. Yeah. Let's put in the word ancient.
The 7 ancient wonders.
Let's have a look.
Of the world.
That changes that completely. Let's have a look.
I think definitely Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
Definitely,
there.
Right. Yeah. It's number 1. In fact, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The mausoleum at how does this Halicarnassus. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Temple of Artemis, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Great Wall of China. That's 9, isn't it? I don't know where you're getting from. And Giza Necropolis. There you go.
Yeah.
That's actually 9, isn't it? But whilst we were on that subject, what are the 7 deadly sins? Let's put in 7. It's piqued my interest there. 7 deadly sins.
Well, greed will be 1. Lust.
Yep, you got 2 there.
What else?
Do you want me to save you?
Greed, lust. Yeah, go on.
We've got gluttony.
Yeah.
We've got sloth. Wrath. Envy and pride. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. We could do a whole podcast on those, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was your book of your teenage years. That takes us on to your movie. Is there a movie which you drove everyone mad by putting it on over and over? Fame.
Baby, look at me. Tell me what you see. Yeah, Fame.
Yeah.
The movie Fame. Oh my God, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven when that came out.
Yeah.
Like,
of course, that's a bit of you, isn't it? Yeah, dancing. Yeah. I knew I was cool. I told you all along I was cool. See how cool these dancers are.
Yeah. And I think I was maybe about 13-ish at the time. So it was quite sort of, adultish.
Yeah,
the movie,
it was, wasn't it? Yeah,
so
alluding adult themes. Yeah.
But But
Edgy, I think is the
but
official
you
word.
had Kids from Fame series on TV, the spin-off.
Yeah.
And so I was an avid watcher of that and had the VHS video recording it every week. And then, you know, wearing out the tape by going over and over the recording and playing it back and learning the song and the dances, you know, by heart.
Yeah, it all struck me as quite girly. I never used to like it because I used to see these blokes prancing around and dancing. I was like, what's all that about? I'll leave that to my sister kind of thing.
You had Leroy as the male dancer.
Okay.
You know, he's a bit of a sort of hip-hoppy dude, but did backflips and all of that. Bit of a streetwisey, sort of dancer rather than a classical trained. But he was classical trained as well. But so he brought that edge to it to make it a bit more, I suppose, masculine and so and I went to see them live, the Kids from Fame live at the Theatre Royal Nottingham, and absolutely loved it.
There's a trend on TikTok at the moment of people trying to do front flips. So can you do a front flip?
No way. No.
Could you ever do a front flip back?
I was never a gymnast.
Nah.
No. I mean, I've taught some children over the years that have been doing as much gymnastics as ballet, and so it was great because they had that amazing flexibility that they could bring into their dance. But
I think it's a stitch up personally because the idea is that you're supposed to try and film yourself doing a front flip because all these people say how easy it is and they do go through the steps. So I reckon it's a stitch up. How easy it is. So I reckon it's a stitch up. So everyone posts their videos of them stacking it and like getting halfway around and falling on the floor and stuff, which most things are on TikTok.
Too old to be doing stuff like that.
The front flip. Yeah, so that was quite a comprehensive answer there. Straight in with the fame. So whose posters did you have on your wall then? What band or artist or album were you big into when you were a cool teenager? Whose posters did you have on your wall?
Yeah, it was sort of the new romantic
era, really?
Like Duran Duran, Tears for Fears, Wham, Simple Minds. Simple Minds reminds me of being 16 years old and on a bus trip to Italy with the school. Yeah. And they had tapes in those days. So I just remember somebody had obviously brought Simple Minds out and they just played that over and over and over. Like, I knew it inside out, back to front.
Isn't it amazing how music can evoke sort of just periods in time to a certain period? Yeah, we all get that, don't we? Like where we were when we heard certain music, and it's remarkable that it does that.
Definitely
Simple Minds.
Sort of 16 years old.
Did you like
having
U2?
A fabulous holiday in Italy, going off piste away from the rest of the school with my friend, getting up to all sorts. But
we said on another podcast I do the other day that we were talking about The Cure at the time, and we kind of said, I don't know where they sort of fitted into the musical landscape of the time. Were they considered part of the New Romantics, or were they kind of the opposite of the New Romantics?
I'm not sure.
No, we can really pinpoint it as to when the popularity grew, because obviously you'd come after the punk and then you had the New Romantics, and then where did The Cure come in? Were they part of any of those movements? Or were they on their own sort of subculture movement?
That kind of
goths, weren't they? Yeah, the goth.
He had that hair going on, didn't he? Yeah. And you know, if you look at people like Howard Jones, who was a New Romantic, you know, he had that hair going on, and there was like Visage, who had that. So there was
the hair was more and more kind of extravagant with their hair. Yeah. So Simple Minds was the one, was it? If you could go and see someone today from that whole period of time.
Do you know who I'd really like to go see? Kate Bush.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, making a bit of a resurgence at the moment because of her appearance in Stranger Things and whatnot.
I love Cloud Busting. Yeah. I love that because of the drums and that kind of beat in the background, and the words, actually, like some of the words that she writes are good really good. So good lyrics, I think. And she was a bit out there, you know. I think she was ahead of her time.
Ahead of her time, definitely.
She was sort of like an art student, you know, and kind of a dance student. And sort of, so she brought her dance into it, and and her sort of creativity and that.
When we were at school,
made her very different from, you couldn't fit her into any particular...
Yeah, you can pigeonhole her or give her.
Definitely the Hounds of Love, that album. Yeah. I remember being, you know, underage drinking around the pubs in Loughborough, and that was always played on the jukebox. So
when we were at school, they showed us Heathcliff. So we had a period when we were teenagers. We used to go around doing Kate Bush impressions, just singing, "It's not me, it's Johnny."
It's me, Kathy.
We had a friend called Jenny, so we adapted it to "It's not me, it's Jenny." We used to go around singing in high-pitched voices.
With my name being Kathy, I used to get all the time.
Used to get people singing karaoke. Has anyone ever dedicated that to you live in a karaoke session and sung it at you, much to your cringe?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge. Who knows? That's some good answers there. So that concludes that period of your life. So we move on to an impeccably cooler adult. So in your adult life, has there been any books recently that have inspired you? Yeah. Catherine, what have you got down?
Yeah, I mean, adulthood, we're talking like my 20s, my 30s, my 40s to present day. So there's a lot more to cover isn't there? And I think those eras of your life, you can have your taste change quite a lot.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would say in the last sort of 20 years or so, book reading has been very much around Tai Chi philosophy, Taoist philosophy, as well as Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah.
So Dharma books, and particularly because I visit regularly a monastery that is Thai Theravada Buddhist tradition. So Ajahn Chah, loads of his written works and teachings, just really down to earth. And the sort of leading monks who trained with him, he's no longer with us, the stuff that they produce as well, it's just that kind of simplicity and uncomplicatedness, but being able to impart to the layperson, in an understandable way. It's just been so useful for mental health, like beyond. So for me, the Dharma books have been a big thing.
Were those teachings ever written down hundreds of years ago, or was it just passed down through the monks and documented in recent?
Texts,
okay, yeah.
And you have the canon, and we have canon and discourse within Tai Chi as well as, so it's quite interesting to see what crosses over into Tai Chi.
Who's got the original texts and scrolls and stuff? Do you know where they are? They protected. They must be protected some way by China, I imagine.
Yeah, because there's obviously the whole kind of how Buddhism came to the world.
Yeah.
And how you've got the famous Chinese monk who travelled and went to India and brought Buddhist texts back to China, and you've got obviously Thailand and so all these sort of Asian countries, to then see kind of how it's come over to the West.
Yeah. And how popular it's become.
Yeah, and how it's almost sort of been taken away from the religious spiritual aspect and put into sort of secular sort of, okay, you can do a course on mindfulness, and how the Westerners have taken it.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on and on there, but I won't, but I'll just keep that fairly, because there's a few other things that come up, like self-help books, like in my 20s, 30s, reading things like Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. And there's a book I still dip into now, which is Deb Shapiro, and it's Your Body Speaks Your Mind.
Yeah.
And that's quite fascinating, just the whole kind of psychosomatic relationship of the mind with the body, and how our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes, our feelings, emotions can all feed in to the body and can actually cause tension, which then becomes a physical thing and causes disharmony in the body. So those kind of books have been a key part of my adulthood. And I think one particular author that jumps out to me when I think back, it would be my sort of early 20s, when I was living and working in Canada, in Toronto. I went over
Jackie
there for
Collins.
a few years.
Jackie Collins.
No. So this was where I was living in a house share, and they had some books on the shelf that must have just been left by people who'd lived there. And there was a whole range of books by Carlos Castaneda.
Yeah.
And it was the teachings of Don Juan. And so there's a whole series of them that he wrote, I think, in the sort of early 70s.
Okay.
And he was an anthropology student. And he was doing research about plants, and he travelled to Mexico, and he ended up meeting this shaman.
Yeah.
And ends up becoming a shaman's apprentice.
Yeah.
And I remember reading these books, and they just sort of blew my mind.
Yeah.
And of course, they are a bit sort of trippy.
Yeah.
You know, he's like taking hallucinogenic stuff and that. But it was the whole kind of, you know, that whole kind of shamanic process of, you know, the death of the self, you know, in that way of just kind of, that whole process that he went through that was quite traumatic sometimes, but it was all about this spiritual path, but doing it in a shamanic way. So I'd never come across anything like that.
That's the great thing about books, isn't it? People just leave them on the shelf for that very purpose, I guess, isn't it? Sometimes you leave a book behind and you go, someone might like that someday, I'm not going to take it with me. Someone like you picks it up and reads the whole lot and is inspired by it. That's the great thing about books, isn't it?
It just really opened up my mind. And it's like, oh, right. Yeah. Sort of hallucinogenic, sort of, I suppose, drugs, but they were plants, but used to induce a certain state to access, you know, the unconscious mind and to let go of stuff that doesn't serve us as a being. And it was really, I think that really set a precedent for sort of a personal journey and exploration into my own personal growth
and also in those days, books, they were actually named after what they actually do, don't they? Rather than these days, you get The Penguin and the Pebble, and it's a psychology book about dancing or something. And if you saw that on a shelf somewhere, The Penguin and the Pebble, I won't bother reading that.
Possibly,
see, in those days, they were more literal, weren't they? What they were about, they gave a little sort of byline, even if it wasn't in the main title of the book. It kind of told you what it's about. But these days, they come up with these extravagant book titles, and they which I kind of have nothing to do with what's going on in the book.
Yes, you have to be in
you have to.
know.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to be that cool, apparently, to know. So, what movie have you been inspired by in your adult years? Is there one that jumped out of your mind at you when we were doing this project?
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because it was kind of groundbreaking of its time, and I think it had that crossover of gracefulness with martial art, which you hadn't really seen in movies. Just
beating people up until that point, wasn't it?
And I mean, I was never into martial arts growing up as a kid anyway, so it's only in my adult years through Tai Chi discovering martial art and the gracefulness that
the
it
movements,
can be.
The graceful
so
movements.
That type of movie just really floated my boat. And you know, another movie back again to sort of my early 20s in Canada. And I went to see this sort of, it was kind of, you know, world movies. And, you know, it was kind of like, I hadn't really gone to stuff like that. And I think someone I worked with was like an art student, and she was all into going to the sort of, a bit like
avant-garde
cinema,
ones.
you know. And we went to see a movie by Wim Wenders. So at that time, I would never have heard of him. I didn't know who he was, but he was, you know, obviously famous for his movies. And as a producer and director, we went to see this movie that was called Until the End of the World, which sounds a bit like, ooh. But actually it was a lot about the future and about them being able to understand people's, like, record people's dreams. So it was quite out there movie storyline, but I was really fascinated about dreams, I think, from an early age.
Same.
So, that movie was kind of like, it really stuck with me, that whole kind of, wow, and I started to write down my dreams.
I was just about to ask you, have you ever written any of them down, like when you wake up, and because they're the best ones, like in the middle of the night?
These days I tend to not. I think I'm quite good at remembering it. I think you can commit yourself to making that decision. I want to remember my dreams. And if you manage to catch it before you're fully awake and start doing other things, you're just starting to wake up and focus on, right, let me try and remember this before I do anything else.
Themes and images, isn't it? A lot of the time.
And I think it's a bit of an inner psyche. And I've got dream dictionaries and books, but really, like, I think it's a very personal thing. And so writing it down and maybe it not making sense at the time, you can possibly look back on it. And I've had sort of premonition type dreams before.
Yeah.
And I've not realised at the time, but because I've written it down, I've then
gone back to it. Yeah.
So as an example, sort of deja vu, where you go somewhere, you know you've not been before, and yet I'm like, I think I've dreamt this. I remember where things are.
Yeah.
And another example was a house I ended up living in with a friend. And I wouldn't have thought I would have moved in with that friend because she had her own property.
Yeah.
But the way things conspired was she was between selling and buying. She needed somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And we ended up actually living in this place. And I'd drawn a picture of it from my dream. And in the dream, it was kind of like all kind of like a building site. It wasn't like a lovely dressed home. But the style of it, the way the rooms were laid out and everything, and being with her, I did end up in a property like that with her.
Yeah.
But about a year or so later.
Yeah.
So, and I think the Egyptians were, in ancient Egypt, really into dream divination.
Yeah.
And I'm quite interested in the whole divination stuff. And I've got the I Ching, and I quite like to dip into that sometimes. And so, So
the amount of times I've woken up from a dream and thought that's really interesting. And I go to my phone to write it down. I'll be like, no, I'll remember that in the morning. And you completely forget it, don't you?
Do you?
Completely gone.
Yeah.
You've dreamt about other stuff by then. It just completely
I think
goes.
some of it is just a load of rubbish, isn't it? And they say...
It's all symbolism,
I think I read somewhere recently they were saying that they now describe like that it's like your brain is literally washing itself. When you're sleeping, when you're dreaming.
I've got the Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud at home. I haven't actually read it yet. It's on my shelf. It's on my shelf, to read, but so I'll have to dig into that. So, the last but not least, musical artist. As an adult, is there anyone that you really have been inspired by or love listening to? Who's on heavy rotation in the Catherine household?
If I go back to my 20s, and possibly my 30s too, loads of dance music. I couldn't pick out any particular artist, but I could pick out maybe the DJs.
The ones that played music live.
I was part of the rave movement, like that was happening in my 20s. So we'd go to sort of like in my little white Fiesta, Ford Fiesta, me and my friends, and we'd drive all over the country to these
to the raves and stuff.
And we'd but even like locally there was some good stuff. There was like we used to go to Progress in Derby. We used to go to Nottingham. I think the other side of Nottingham there was Hot to Trot. And then there was a big one called Time at Aston Villa Leisure Centre in Birmingham. We used to go to that. And you'd be sort of going to these all-nighters, dancing all night. And it was all about the DJs, like Carl Cox and Paul Oakenfold and, all these sort of
Pat
names.
and Mick.
Don't know. I mean, I didn't get into any drug taking, but I think most people did. But me and my friends, we were just quite happy to dance all night. And actually nobody was drinking. They were like on happy pills. So the atmosphere was really kind of quite nice and positive.
Aggressive
I think the downside was people were taking stuff and not really knowing what they were doing and overdosing or, there were the odd occasion where you would see someone getting medical attention, But overall, I did have a fantastic time during that era. But if I'm thinking of like an actual artist, one that comes up to sort of very present for me is a Japanese Zen Buddhist monk, Ugetsu Akasaka. And he does beatbox.
Really?
With his voice. He plays is it the hand drum? They're like a metal drum with different points.
The Caribbean kind
drum
of.
Or hand drum, something like that. He plays one of those. I think he plays guitar and other stuff too. But
good old boy.
He does, with his voice, all these Buddhist mantras as well. So he's sort of doing all these amazing chants like Heart Sutra and all sorts. And of course he records his sound,
Yeah.
and then he'll kind of have
Layer
that on a loop.
Yeah, layer it and loop it, yeah.
And he'll change it, and then he'll do something else,
Yeah.
and add that, and so he's just creating all these
Awesome.
layers.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
And I discovered him during the lockdowns, and he did this kind of 108-day challenge.
Yeah.
And so every day on YouTube, he was just posting a live, feed of him doing a 20-minute set.
Yeah.
And, you could sort of message into him and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really, most of it was very relaxing music and really good for Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation. And I think it was all about helping people who were really stressed during, the whole
lockdown,
sort of stress we were going through. But since then, I was always like, I've got a strong link to Japan, and I've been, and I was like, it'd be really cool when I get back to Japan to see him live in Tokyo. That would be so cool. So I always had that in my head. And then in the summer, only a month or so ago, I arranged this sort of weekend with a friend of mine who lives in London, and it was a Japanese themed weekend.
Yeah.
So I think we had sushi planned on the Friday, and then we were going to a Japanese culture and arts exhibition on Saturday. And the day before, I saw on his social media, he was like, I'm in London this weekend.
Wow.
And here's the link. I'm playing live on Saturday night. I was like,
no way.
Oh my God.
On the same day that you were already having the Japanese
my
themes.
God.
That is
I was like,
fate,
this is
isn't it?
divine
That's fate.
intervention.
It is.
So I looked online and I was like, there might not be any tickets, but no, tickets are available. Tickets for 2 for 1.
Blimey.
And I messaged my friend and said, look, I'm going to get these tickets. I've got to go to this. And, I'll get tickets for you. And it's 2 for 1 anyway. I was like, if you don't want to go, it's fine. I'm going to go anyway. But I think you'll love it.
Yeah.
And she's got a strong link with Japan. She has students from Japan sometimes staying with her.
Yeah.
So we were like, let's do it. So we went along to see him live.
Awesome.
I was a bit of a groupie. I'd gone up to him and I was like, I've been following you during the lockdown, and had a picture with him and I just said how much I loved his sound. And interestingly as well, he was performing in a venue that I used to go to on a Saturday morning for Tai Chi instructor training.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
And I'm going back sort of 20 years ago. And that's probably the last time I would have been there. Yeah. So it was really kind of like, ooh.
Yeah, how random you're in that building and it's the person you love listening to is there.
And it was a nice venue actually for what he was doing. Oh yeah, so
that was one good thing about the lockdown, wasn't it? They brought the artists nearer to their fans and stuff. I remember the band I love, Biffy Clyro. They did a live performances, and like you said about the interaction. And there's a song called Christopher's River, which I love off their first album. And I put it up on the comments, and he actually read it out. He's like, he read my name out and he's like, Christopher's River. Yeah, we'll do that next time. And he actually did that song, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song, Christopher's River. And everyone was asking for it as well. But he actually read out my name and said that. So that was one good thing. It sort of brought artists and their fans a bit closer together. And you could have that interaction with them, couldn't you? Really, it was really, really good. Yeah. So that's a great place to leave it there. It all ties all the ends up nicely, doesn't it? All the,
I think so.
You and your Tai Chi training, and then getting to see the guy that you love as a singer or an artist in later life in one of the venues where you had your training. That's a perfect circle. Yeah, perfect circle, isn't it?
And that's life to me. It's one big spiral and circle, and time, is it linear? I mean, that's a man-made concept, really, What we have is now, apparently. So,
the past is a memory, the future is your imagination. There you go. All you can live in is now. That's what I like to do. The Buddha hands, it reminds me to live in the now. That's the past and the future.
Yeah.
This is obviously good radio, isn't it?
And that's your yin and your yang as well.
People can't see what we're doing on the podcast, but we're doing the Buddhist hand. What would you call that movement?
Well, I mean, that's prayer position, but
yeah.
In Japanese, they call it the gasho, which is like the prayer position.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, from a Tai Chi perspective, that's your masculine and
yeah, of course, the opposites,
coming together.
Yeah,
So
perfect end to the podcast, Catherine.
yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in to finish off your 3 for Freedom. That was most interesting. We've got some great answers there.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I'll check out some of those songs and some of those books and some of those artists that you mentioned today. Especially that Bee Gees song. I've not heard that Bee Gees song, and as a big
I won't sing it.
Bee Gees fan, I'll definitely check that one out because I do love the Bee Gees.
I've got it in my head now. I'm going to have to play that in the Tai Chi lesson, I think.
Absolutely. And I'm actually going to participate in Catherine's Tai Chi lesson, so we might do a follow-up podcast of my findings of my first Tai Chi lesson. You never know. It could be a third.
No
You might be back for a third podcast, Catherine. You never know. Okay, so thanks very much, Catherine, and we'll speak to you again soon, no doubt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Let's Be Frank podcast is brought to you by the Oasis Partnership, a charity providing high-quality social and psychological support services to improve people's mental health and well-being. We deliver socially inclusive, open access support for the wider communities of Buckinghamshire through pioneering and innovative partnerships and initiatives. Oasis provides free and subsidised health and wellbeing classes and support groups for the Chiltern area, including mindfulness, yoga, Tai Chi, Reiki, fitness, boxing, art and music. Oasis also helps support people to reach their full potential through our substance misuse treatment service, Routes to Work and outreach service. The Oasis Substance Misuse Treatment Service is provided in partnership with Inclusion, part of Midlands Partnership NHS Foundation Trust, delivering 1 recovery bucks. The Let's Be Frank podcast was launched in tribute to the memory of long-term Oasis patron and world-renowned cinematographer Frank Hodge, and is recorded in the Frank Hodge Podcast Studio, our new community podcasting facility launched in his honour.